Well, welcome. My name is Jim Vahrenkamp, and this is my presentation on developing championship hurdlers. I've had a number of athletes, both on the male and the female side, compete at the national level and win a couple different conference championships and NCAA championships. And so, what I am going to do today is I am going to share with you some of my own opinions that frame why we do what we do. I think there's probably a formula out there. People have got their own opinions about what hurdling is and how it should be done. And I think I've got a unique perspective on that. A lot of people tell me what they think is a must have, what you got to do to be successful. And I certainly agree that there are big rocks, but I will tell you this. I believe hurdling is based upon a rhythmic expression of speed. And I am more so the artist in the world than I am the scientist. With every coach, there's a different way that they view the world and a different way that they interact with it. I'm a little bit more of a mixture of maybe the science and the art piece. I'm not so artistic in that we don't have any scientifically based rationale for what we do. But I kind of view it the same way as playing a musical instrument. What we are doing is we are trying to provide different stimulus to the athlete where they can practice the rhythm of their piece or their performance over and over again. For me, posture is paramount. Nobody moves fast with poor posture. That dictates also our ability to transmit force. So a lot of times when people are struggling with transmitting force, it comes back to a postural issue. So we are constantly trying to refine posture. And I'm also trying to inform kids that posture is not a moment in time. It is how they interact with the world perpetually. Okay. The other thing that I really think about hurdles is that fast people are fast because of genetic predispositions. I think far too often they're steered just straight to the 100-meter dash. I know it's the coolest, it's the sexiest event, but I would love to see us steer or challenge more kids to express that speed and power in things like the hurdles and the long jump and in the high jump. So I'd love us to continue to steer people towards those events more so than that has been done in the past. I do think that there's a lot of room for development in the hurdling times that we have seen. They've come down over the years. I think they can continue to come down more as we move more fast people into those events. The one thing, the caveat that I will give you is that just because a person is fast doesn't mean they have the ability to express speed and power rhythmically, which is super necessary for being able to hurdle. So an example too of commonalities and similarities here is that there are a lot of commonalities with hurdling in the long jump. These are two examples, two young ladies that I've worked with over the last 2 years. This is what they did last year. Number one, this girl ran 13:57 in the same track meet. She jumped 6:37 in long jump. And in a track meet, I want to say 2 weeks prior to that, she scored 56:85 in the heptathlon, which at the time I think was 16th in the NCAA. The young lady below this year ran 13:27 in the hurdles, jumped 5:93 in the long jump, and scored 56:34 in the heptathlon, which I think was 17th in the NCAA. Why are they great long jumpers? Well, they're great long jumpers because they are great hurdlers, and they are also great hurdlers because they are great long jumpers. The same principles, the setup for the takeoff, the acceleration development is exactly the same, or I shouldn't say exactly the same. It is similar, and the principles that apply to long jump apply to the hurdles. More holistically, I would say all of the events that are in the heptathlon, if we throw out the 800-meter dash, there are a ton of similarities there. And so I think that far too often we pigeonhole kids as this person is a insert whatever it is. There are, I think, some genetic predispositions for events. Normally, high jumpers are very tall. Sprinters are a little bit in that mid-range where they're a little bit shorter. 400-meter kids are taller and more lean than 100 and 200-meter kids. But certainly, I think the girl that runs 13:57 is 5'8", the girl who runs 13:27 is 5'9". They're both like 5'8", 5'9" high jumpers. That one of them throws the implements really well. The other one is a little bit faster, but there are similarities in all the events. I mean, that's the one thing that I want you to take away from this, is that maybe we should be thinking about hurdling as a door to maybe all of the other events as well. So how do we address this puzzle? Okay. To me, frequency and rhythm are king. And when we practice stuff, we almost always three-step. And I'm thinking about how I introduce athletes to the hurdles. We truncate the spacing in an effort to allow kids to experience body positions, postures, and rhythms that need to be expressed in the maximal race environment. Okay. I want those spaces to increase as kids get faster. So what do? We start them in a place where they can three-step, and we work on that rhythm. And as they get better and better, the hurdles come out. We're, of course, always working on acceleration, max velocity, special endurance, and hurdle endurance. Always. Any good program is always working on those, because no one exists in a vacuum where we just hurdle. You've also got to be able to accelerate to hurdle. There are max velocity components to hurdling. There are special endurance components to hurdling, whether it's the 100-meter hurdles, whether it's the 400-meter hurdles. We're trying to develop all of those things in a conjugate system where we're doing a lot of the same things at the same time. One of the things that's always frustrated me is that presenters always say, we do multi-throws, and then they move on. For a long time, I just was like, I don't know what multi-throws are. We didn't really have that as a part of our program when I was in college, or if we did, I completely ignored it and walked away from it. But maybe an easy way for me to explain this, overhead back, where I take a med ball that's weighted and I throw it overhead backwards, is a more specific expression of hip extension than squat or clean, because of the velocities of the limb movement. Between legs forward very closely mirrors the demands that are placed on the body for the block clearance. So why are we doing this stuff? We're trying to do things that are specific in nature, that will enhance things that come directly in the race, such as our block clearance, and or developing motion in the first acceleration phase of the race. Okay. We do some rotational stuff so that we don't just live in one plane. We want to rotate, challenge the body in that way as well. And if we want to intensify these things, we go hop and drop, which creates, of course, an eccentric load in the system. Then we get a concentric firing of the entire system, and that adds intensity. We also do multi-jumps. So on days where we have more of a horizontal or an acceleration theme, we do a lot of standing long jump. We also test that stuff. We measure that stuff. We measure what is our overhead back PR with standardized weight. We also measure what is our standing long jump. So we're looking at what are we doing? How are we progressing in this task? We also do hops that develop stiffness, such as hurdle hops, box jumps, that kind of thing. Fundamentally, I really look at each individual as a unique puzzle. Everybody has specific problems when it comes to expressing speed, power in a race. Okay? Some people are great at displacement. Some people are great at frequency. Some people are great postures. And really early on in my career, I thought, once I figure out whether a person is a pusher or a puller, has problems with frequency, then I'll get that answer, and then I'll take that answer and I'll get the secret workouts. And we'll do that and it'll solve everything. In reality, the workouts that everyone does from a coaching standpoint are very similar. Everyone hurdles. Everybody does block clearances. Everybody does hurdle endurance, whether it's just in a race or whether it is in practice. The difference is our ability to communicate and to identify the viruses in the system that each unique individual has. Okay. Task is the same. Everybody's got to do the same thing, which is run a race. Okay. So I try to figure out what is the experience that the student athlete has that causes them to view and interact with the physical world in the way that they do. I also work on my communication with kids. Okay. So I can say the same thing to a group of 30 different kids, and 30 different people can hear 30 different things. Even it may be the same key. I may say push, and a kid may just hear blah, 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 not be able to interpret it. The way that I work on that is I encourage our student athletes to communicate with one another, learn from one another. Really, that to me, I want all of our kids to be critical thinkers. I want them to be able to think outside the box, ask really intelligent questions. And my goal is to take them where they are from novice to master and move them along that continuum the entire time, hopefully in the right direction, right? We want to be able to teach towards what we think is the ultimate task, and the ultimate task is clearing 10 barriers as fast as possible. So what do we know about hurdling? Okay, so people can look at hurdles, kind of determine their own solution to a task, but there has to be a certain tolerance, and that tolerance is the task, right? So we look at some athletes here. They both are using different legs as they cross the hurdles, but we see a uniformity in posture as they do so. So even though we talked about the task is clearing 10 barriers as fast as possible, nobody has run those 10 barriers backwards. And so what we find is that we find within hurdling way more similarities than we find differences. Okay. So what are the variables? And what are the things that we can manipulate and adjust that are going to enable us to give people an opportunity to learn the most? Well, obviously, hurdle height. There is no golden rule that says that you have to hurdle at a max height all the time. Do I think it behooves us to send our men over what is the highest height that they'll clear? Probably, because we also have psychological and emotional alarm bells based on alarm theory that are going to come up. Okay, we need to combat fear, which is a major virus in the system. We want people to be confident and ready to go. So men probably need to have hurdled over 42 and developed a level of comfort with that before they are faced with 42-inch hurdles in a race at the collegiate level. Now, high school level is 39 inches, and you may be coaching kids at even a younger level, middle school level, where it's 36. We need to experience some of those things so that there's a level of comfort and people are emotionally ready for the challenge. We can also change that height to change velocities. I know that for myself, I was a hurdler and I could move much more comfortably over a 36-inch hurdle than I could over a 42-inch hurdle. It required less range of motion in the actual hurdling as I went over the top of it, and I was able to express speed and power a lot quicker in between the hurdles. So if the day is to express more horizontal velocity and not worry so much about the clearance, maybe your day is where you have guys going over 10 hurdles at the 36-inch height, or even less, 33. There are no rules, right? It can be as low as possible. It can be as high as possible. In addition, you can also change the hurdle spacing. A traditional start is 10 steps to the first hurdle. You could be doing 7 steps to the first hurdle. 8 steps to the first hurdle is traditional. You could be doing 10 to increase the velocity of going over that first hurdle. They could do a 10-step, into a 3-step, into a 5-step to add more velocity into the system, into a 3-step, 3-step, 3-step. And so you could be changing your rhythms. You could also be discounting the differences. It could be 3 steps discounted by 2 shoes. It could be 3 steps discounted by 3 shoes. It could be very short. It could be singles over the top. But what we need to understand is that we can change these variables, the height and the spacing. And the spacings don't have to be consistent. You know, it could be 3-step, 5-step, 10-step, any of that stuff. We can also change the number of hurdles in a total run. It can be 1 start to 1 hurdle. It can be not even a block clearance. It could be a jog into 1 hurdle where we're just starting to teach postures and rhythms. And then we can be doing hurdle endurance things where things can be discounted, truncated, and they're going over 10 to 12 to 14 different hurdles, and we're working on finishing the race. Lots of different options. And really, the world is your oyster, and I want you to think about, go ahead and understand what the task is, but then take the hurdles and manipulate that in a way where you can actually work towards what each individual person needs. You may have a general theme for the day. It might be acceleration, but you might have 4 different lines of hurdles set up for beginners, intermediate, masters, so that you can give each one of them a challenge that's going to help them move along that continuum of becoming a great hurdler. So now that we've identified the variables, we have to ask, like, what are my goals? I always look at developing a uniform progression within touchdowns. And if you look at this total time here, if we go 2:44 to the first hurdle, 3:49 to the next hurdle, we know that that's 2:44 to the first and 1:05 to the next. I give a lot of touchdown times, get my watch out, bang, 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 as people are going through. I'm doing it on first movement. I always do it the same way. I chart that a lot of the times, and I give feedback to my kids. So I may say, we may be in a practice, a kid goes through a run, they complete it, they start walking back, and I say, look at my watch and go 44, 05, 03, 00, 99, 99, 98. And then I'm just giving them the feedback, and they've heard that enough times where they can interpret that. But I have to start by creating a foundation and explaining what we're actually trying to do, what our goals are. So fundamentally, I believe that the coach-athlete relationship is a partnership. I'm not a dictator. The athlete is also not a dictator. We're partners. We're codependent upon one another to get better. I can't run the race for the athlete, and the athlete typically can't coach themselves. That's why we as coaches exist. It's also why teams exist. That's why we work together in an effort to achieve something greater than what we can on our own. I also like to provide variation for the kids. So that may mean, again, like distances. It may mean thematically what we're doing that day. It may also mean coaches. So we have 3 different coaches on staff that in some way work with the hurdles. It may mean that we change roles each day. One person is directing the session while another person is helping chart, moving things around, so that they hear a different voice. Because a lot of times I find that I can say something over and over and over again, and it becomes stale. If one of our other assistants comes in, uses different verbiage, different words to express the same end goal, it can create an adaptation in that student athlete that would have never happened if I continued to say, this is what I want you to do. I, as a coach, also have to be willing to step back and say, I'm not the smartest person in the room. I've got some great ideas. I want to work with my other assistants to say, what are you seeing? What are we seeing in as a trend, as a group? And then we might work together to try some different things that provide opportunity for student athletes to experience the same thing differently. One of the things that I'm always working for is developing context. I want our student athletes to understand the task and understand the variables that govern the results as they try to go about that task. One of those things that we always work on that almost nobody comes to us with that skill is dribbling. So let's take a look at what dribbling looks like. This is Aries Merit at a Diamond League meet. And I want you to look at the height of the ankle recovery in between the hurdles. Big over the top, a little in between. He's going to go through, he's going to win this, but look, it's just over again. So you see a lot of frequency there, not a huge emphasis on displacement. You can see that it's about an ankle recovery in between each one of those. He's going to finish there. I'm just going to back this up and take a look. In between, you can see that there's a low ankle recovery here. It is not a knee-height ankle recovery. Let him go all the way through here again. Try to get back on the slow-mo. as you watch, he's going to step through here. All of these guys, there's a uniformity to how they move. The height of the ankle recovery is very low. This is on the run in. You can see things change, get very, very big, but in between the hurdles, little, 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 little. But we got to figure out how to manage takeoff locations. That's another one for all of my student athletes. We're generally taking off in between 5 and 6 feet out from the hurdle and landing 3 feet behind the hurdle. There's a finite number of steps. We're trying to manage this pattern and this rhythm. So we have 8 steps to the first hurdle. We also have a defined takeoff distance for the 8th step. We have a defined landing location for step 9, then step 10 and 11, and takeoff at 11. Okay, so we're looking at having a defined location for all of those things. And a lot of times I chart those things with chalk. We may put down something physically as a takeoff, kind of like a long jump board. It'll be a large piece of black mat with a chalk line in the middle of it. So there's something different than what's going on the track to give them something visual to actually steer towards. But we also teach an acceleration pattern where we push for 3 to 4 with no concern about the location of the hurdle. And then after 1, 2, 3, 4, eyes are up, locate the hurdle, step, step, takeoff. Okay. I'm trying to figure all of those things out. Once we get that figured out, we're trying to refine that specific pattern over and over and over again. And we're also trying to figure out ways that we can challenge it so that people can adapt. Final piece of this. Got to also remember that at some point, our student athletes need to be able to express maximal quality. Load and rest are super important, but I think a lot of times we overdo the loading and underdo the resting. I know that I'm guilty of that. I, much like my athletes, are addicted to work. It makes me wonder if we rested more and had higher quality reps in practice, maybe just less volume, could we get a higher peak out of our year? I don't know. So hopefully, I just hope that this talk made you think. It made you think about what you've done as a coach. It made you think about what you can change. If you have questions, if you have anything that you would love, answers to, or even just my thoughts on, which are not necessarily answers, just thoughts. My email is here. This is obviously on YouTube as you're watching it here, but I just want you to feel free to continue the conversation with me more. So I look forward to hearing from you, and hopefully you enjoyed this presentation.